When I was lying in a hospital bed with cracked ribs and a concussion, my father did not ask if I was okay. He leaned over me and said, "Pay the $950 you owe or do not come back home." That was the moment I realized the accident was not the worst thing that happened to me that week. Within 30 days, my credit score collapsed, 3 credit cards appeared in my name, my job questioned my stability, and the man who called me irresponsible was suddenly under federal investigation for $186,000 in disability fraud. My name is Marianne Holloway. I am 34 years old, and this is how I learned that revenge is not loud, it is legal. Chapter 1. Pay rent or get out. I woke up to the sound of my own breathing, and it did not sound right. Each inhale felt shallow, like my chest could not fully expand, and every exhale burned as if something sharp was pressing from the inside. The room was too bright. White light bounced off white walls and turned everything flat and unreal. Somewhere nearby, rubber soles tapped against tile, slow and steady, and a machine behind me kept time with a soft electronic rhythm. The smell of antiseptic was so strong it sat at the back of my throat. Someone had told me I was lucky. A nurse said it while adjusting a monitor, her voice calm and practiced, the way people speak when they have said the same thing 100 times before. Lucky to be alive. Lucky it was not worse. I nodded because that felt like the correct response, even though my head felt heavy and my ribs screamed every time I moved. The accident had happened the night before, late March of 2024, on a wet stretch of road outside Columbus. I remembered headlights and then nothing. I was still trying to piece myself together when I felt a change in the room. Not a sound, not a movement, just a shift. I opened my eyes and saw my father standing near the foot of the bed. Richard Holloway was 62 years old and looked exactly the same as he had for as long as I could remember. Tall, rigid, jaw tight, eyes sharp with a kind of permanent irritation. He did not ask how I was. He did not look at the bruises blooming along my collarbone or the way my right hand trembled against the blanket. He did not even step closer. He told me that my rent was late. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. The words did not fit the setting. Hospital rooms were for quiet voices and concerned questions, but he repeated himself, slower this time, as if I were hard of hearing. $950, due on the 1st. It was already past the 1st. He said it like he was reading from a ledger, his tone flat, controlled, almost bored. I felt heat rise in my face. I was aware of my body in a way I had never been before. The thin gown, the wires attached to my chest, the way I could not sit up without pain. I told him I had been in an accident. I told him I was still in the emergency room. The words came out uneven, breath catching between sentences. He said that being in an accident did not change my responsibilities. He said I was 34 years old and not a child. He said living in his house was a privilege, not a right. Each sentence landed with a dull thud, one after another, measured and precise. From the hallway, I saw Elaine. My stepmother stood just outside the doorway, her arms crossed, eyes flicking from her watch to the room and back again. She did not speak, she did not meet my eyes. She simply waited, as if this were an appointment that needed to stay on schedule. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the nurse to come back, or the doctor, or anyone who could interrupt this moment and remind him where we were. But the room was quiet. The machine behind me continued its steady rhythm. No one else came in. My father leaned closer then, not enough to touch me, but close enough that I could smell his aftershave, sharp and familiar. He told me that excuses did not pay bills. He told me that if I could not manage my finances, that was my problem, not his. I tried to respond, to explain that my paycheck had gone to medical copays the month before, that I had planned to catch up, that I just needed time. The words tangled together and fell apart before they reached him. He reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out my house key. I did not realize what he was doing at first. It took a second for my brain to catch up. He held the key between his fingers, the metal catching the harsh light, and told me that until I paid what I owed, I would not be coming and going as I pleased. He said it was for my own good, that maybe this would teach me responsibility. Then he closed his hand around it and slipped it into his pocket. Something inside me went still. I did not scream, I did not argue, I did not ask him to give it back. My body felt heavy, pinned to the bed by more than just pain. My thoughts raced in circles, each one crashing into the next. If I lost the house, I would lose my address. If I lost my address, everything else would unravel. My job, my insurance, the fragile balance I had been maintaining for years. I thought about calling security. I thought about asking for help. But fear pressed down on me harder than my injuries. Fear of what would happen next. Fear of retaliation. Fear of being seen as the problem. I had spent most of my adult life trying not to cause trouble, trying to be reasonable, trying to keep the peace. In that moment, those instincts took over completely. My father straightened his jacket, glanced once more at the room, and said he expected the money by the end of the week. Then he turned and walked out. Elaine followed him without a word. I lay there staring at the ceiling long after they were gone. The nurse eventually returned and asked if I needed anything. I shook my head. I did not know how to explain what had just happened without sounding dramatic or ungrateful. I told myself I would deal with it later. I told myself to focus on getting through the next hour, then the next. A few hours later, they discharged me. The paperwork was thick and confusing, full of instructions and warnings. Take it easy, watch for dizziness, come back if the pain gets worse. I nodded and signed where they pointed, my hands still unsteady. A volunteer wheeled me down to the exit and the IMATIC doors opened to a gray afternoon. The parking lot stretched out in front of me, rows of cars under a low sky. The cold air hit my face and made my eyes water. For a moment, I just stood there, holding the discharge papers against my chest, trying to decide what to do next. I did not feel angry yet. I did not feel ready to fight. What I felt was a hollow kind of disbelief, like I had stepped sideways into a version of my life I didn't recognize. The place I thought I belonged had quietly closed its doors, and I had not seen it coming. I took a slow breath, as deep as my ribs would allow, and looked out at the rows of cars again. I told myself I would figure it out. I told myself this was temporary. But as I stood there alone in the hospital parking lot, one thing was already clear. I no longer had a place that felt safe to go back to.
Chapter 2. This was never a home. The drive back through Columbus felt unreal, like I was watching myself from a distance. Every stoplight took too long. Every bump in the road sent a sharp reminder through my ribs that I was not fine, no matter how many forms I had signed saying I was stable enough to leave. I kept telling myself that once I got home, once I lay down in my own bed, things would make more sense. The house looked exactly the same when I pulled up. Same siding, same porch lights, same quiet street. That almost fooled me. I parked along the curb instead of the driveway. My usual spot was taken by a compact sedan I did not recognize, still wearing a dealer tag. My stomach tightened, but I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I walked up to the front door and reached into my pocket out of habit. Then I remembered, even if I had my key, it would not have mattered. I tried the handle anyway. Locked. I knocked. Once, then again, harder. After a long pause, the door opened just enough to reveal Elaine's face. She did not smile. She did not look surprised. She looked irritated, like I had shown up late to something she had already decided to be done with. She asked if I had the money. I said I needed my things. I said I had just gotten out of the hospital. My voice sounded thin, even to me. She glanced down the street, then back at me, and finally opened the door a little wider. She said I could take a few boxes, nothing more. Richard was not home, she said, though she did not meet my eyes when she said it. The inside of the house felt wrong, too quiet, too staged. My things were stacked near the hallway in uneven piles, like someone had rushed to clear space. Clothes stuffed into a laundry basket, books shoved into a box that was already splitting at the seams. One of my framed photos was face down on top of everything. I walked toward my bedroom and stopped. The bed had been stripped and remade with different sheets. My lamp was gone. Half the hangers in the closet were empty. It looked less like my room and more like something being prepared for the next person. I felt dizzy and had to grab the doorframe. "Where is my laptop?" I asked. Elaine stayed in the hallway. She said Richard had it. She said he was keeping it so I would not disappear without paying what I owed. She said it calmly, like it was a reasonable precaution. I asked about my papers, my mail, the folders I kept in my desk. I could see drawers sitting slightly open, things not put back the way I left them. Elaine shrugged. She said everything important was still there. Lucas appeared from the living room, hoodie pulled up, eyes already bored. He was 29 and somehow managed to look both older and younger at the same time. He did not ask how I was. He barely looked at me. I asked him if he knew where my laptop was. He shrugged and said, "Dad said you owe money." That was the end of the conversation. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab everything I owned and leave in one trip. But my body was still weak, my ribs burning every time I moved. I told myself, not yet, not like this. I bent down and started packing what I could reach. Each item felt heavier than it should have. A sweater I wore every winter, a mug from college, a folder labeled taxes that was thinner than it should have been. I flipped through it and felt my chest tighten when I saw gaps where statements used to be. Elaine watched me closely, like she was waiting for me to do something she could use against me. She said Richard would call later. She said he did not want a scene. I carried 2 boxes out to my car and set them in the back seat. By the time I sat behind the wheel, I was shaking from the effort. I closed my eyes and tried to slow my breathing. My phone buzzed. An email notification. For a split second, I felt relief. Work. Something normal. I opened it without thinking. The sender line made my stomach drop. Human resources. The email was polite, careful. It said they wanted to meet to discuss some concerns that had been raised about my stability and my ability to perform my role effectively. It said the meeting was not disciplinary, but they needed clarity. The signature read, Hannah Pierce, Senior HR Manager, Midwest Supply Chain Solutions. Stability. Ability. I stared at the words until they blurred. I could almost hear my father's voice behind them, calm and concerned, saying he just wanted what was best for me. I imagined Elaine nodding along, Lucas saying nothing. My hands started to tremble. I turned the phone face down and pressed it against my leg, trying to ground myself. I opened my banking app next. I needed to know if I could pay him and make this stop. The balance was lower than I expected, drained by medical copays and time off work. My chest tightened again. A colder thought followed. If Richard had my laptop and my papers, what else had he access to? I opened my credit monitoring app, something I rarely checked. The screen took a moment to load. When it did, my breath caught. 3 credit cards, all in my name, accounts opened over the past few years, a balance of $28,400. I scrolled in disbelief. Dates going back to 2021, late payments, a credit score that had dropped further than I thought possible. This cannot be real, I thought. I pay my bills, I'm careful. The fear that followed was immediate and practical. I would not be able to rent an apartment. I would not be able to get a loan if my car failed. If my job wavered, I would have nowhere to land. I looked up and saw Elaine standing in the doorway, watching me from behind the glass. Her expression did not change. Across the street, Rosa Alvarez was checking her mail. She noticed me sitting there and walked over slowly. She did not ask questions. She just said, quietly, "This is not normal." I nodded because that was all I could manage. When she walked away, I sat alone in my car with 2 boxes of my life and a phone full of proof that something was very wrong. Every part of me wanted to go back inside and demand answers, to call Richard and scream, to fire off an angry reply to HR. But I could already see how that would end. A shaken woman, emotional and reactive, confirming every story being told about her. I took a slow breath and made myself stay still. If I wanted to survive this, I could not react the way they expected me to. I needed to keep control.
Chapter 3. Silence on Purpose. Staying in control meant changing everything about how I moved through my days. I did not disappear. I did not call in sick. I went to work, logged into meetings, answered emails, and spoke in the same even tone I always had. On the outside, nothing looked different. On the inside, I was counting. I stayed with a friend across town, sleeping on a couch that smelled faintly of laundry detergent and coffee. It was temporary, she said, as many nights as I needed. I thanked her and kept my explanations vague. I was tired of explaining. Every morning I folded the blanket, made the couch look untouched, and went about my day as if my life had not quietly split in two. At night, I wrote things down. Not feelings, facts, dates, times, exact words, when Richard called, when Elaine texted, when Lucas stayed silent. I wrote down the day I noticed my laptop missing, the day the HR email arrived, the day my credit report changed. I kept screenshots, photos, copies of everything I could access. I backed them up in more than one place. I learned to label files clearly so nothing could be mistaken later. I did not know yet what I would do with any of it. I only knew that forgetting would cost me more than remembering. In between work and sleep, I started reading, slowly, carefully. I typed words into search bars that felt unreal when I first saw them. Identity theft, credit freeze, fraud report, restraining order. Each term opened a new door to another set of rules and warnings. I read the same pages more than once because my brain would slide off the details. I called numbers listed at the bottom of websites and waited on hold, listening to recorded voices tell me my call was important. Sometimes the line would go dead and I would have to start again. A woman on one call spoke too fast. I asked her to repeat herself and she sighed, not unkindly, but tired. I wrote down what I could catch. Another person transferred me 3 times before I reached someone who actually answered my question. Every step felt like wading through mud, slow and frustrating, but it was movement. The first real pressure came in the form of a text message from my father. It arrived late in the evening, just as I was getting ready to sleep. "Stop spreading lies about me. If you keep this up, I will have no choice but to take legal action for defamation." I stared at the screen for a long time. My heart began to race, not from surprise, but from recognition. This was how he worked. Calm threats, clean language, the implication that I was already in the wrong. I did not reply. Instead, I took a screenshot and added it to my folder. Date, time, sender. The next day, he sent another message, shorter this time. "You are making a mistake." I saved that one too. Rosa was the first person to say something that changed how I saw the situation. She caught me one afternoon as I was coming back from the grocery store, my arms full and my body still slower than it used to be. "He is not as sick as he says," she told me quietly. "I see him hauling equipment into his truck all the time, has been for years." I asked her what she meant. She shrugged, like it was obvious. "Heavy stuff, ladders, boxes. He moves just fine when no one is watching." That night, I sat at the small kitchen table in my friend's apartment and opened a new document. I wrote Richard's name at the top. Underneath it, I wrote disability. Then I started listing dates. I remembered the year he applied, 2016. I remembered how suddenly he stopped working, how he talked about doctors and forms, and how unfair everything was. I also remembered the side jobs, the quiet cash work, the way he never seemed as limited as he claimed. I pulled up public information and matched timelines the best I could. It was not proof, not yet, but it was a pattern. The next piece fell into place by accident. Natalie Brooks worked as an assistant for my father. I had met her once, briefly, at a holiday dinner years earlier. She was young, polite, nervous. She sent me an email by mistake, forwarding a schedule meant for someone else. I almost deleted it without reading. Then I saw his name. It was a simple thing. Dates, meetings, travel times, nothing dramatic, but it showed movement. It showed work. It showed a man who was very capable of doing more than he claimed. I did not reply. I did not alert her to the mistake. I saved the email and added it to the growing file on my laptop. By then, I knew I needed help, not emotional support, professional guidance. Caleb Monroe's office was small and plain, the kind of place that didn't waste money on decoration. He listened more than he spoke, his hands folded neatly on the desk as I explained. I did not exaggerate. I did not cry. I stuck to the facts the way I had learned. When he finished, he leaned back slightly and took a breath. "You need to be careful," he said. "Iowa law is specific about recording conversations. If your evidence is not clean, it can hurt you more than help you." I asked him if I was doing the right thing. He did not answer right away. "You are doing the careful thing," he said finally. "That matters." I walked out of his office with no promises and no guarantees, just a clearer understanding of the risks. It was enough. The breakdown came later when I was alone. I sat on the edge of the couch, the room dark except for the glow from my phone, and let myself feel it. The weight of knowing I couldn't trust my own family. The quiet grief of realizing that the people who should have protected me were the ones setting traps. I cried then, not loudly, not for long, just enough to release the pressure building in my chest. When it passed, I wiped my face and opened my notebook again. By the end of the week, everything I had was organized. Messages, emails, screenshots, notes, timelines. I knew what I had. I knew what I didn't. I knew where the gaps were. I was still not ready to confront anyone, not yet. But for the first time since the hospital, I felt steady. I closed the notebook, set it beside me, and turned off the light. The next phase would require action. I was almost there.
Chapter 4. When the truth started moving. Action did not arrive as a single moment. It arrived in pieces, spread across days that blurred together, each one demanding more patience than I thought I had left. I started early one morning at the small desk in my friend's spare room, laptop open, notes spread around me like a quiet confession. I placed a credit freeze first. The woman on the phone spoke gently, but her questions were precise. She asked me to confirm details I had not said out loud in years. Addresses, old phone numbers, a middle name I rarely used. Each answer felt like reclaiming a fragment of myself. When she told me it was complete, I felt no relief, only a strange emptiness, like locking a door after something valuable had already been taken. Next came the identity theft report, online forms that asked me to summarize what had happened in boxes too small for the truth. I chose my words carefully. I avoided emotion. I attached documents, screenshots, dates. Every upload came with a pause, a moment where I wonder if I was making things worse. When I finally clicked submit, my hands were damp with sweat. The disability issue was heavier. I did not file anything myself. I gathered what I had, the timelines, the notes from Rosa, the email from Natalie that showed meetings and travel. I sent it through the channel Caleb had recommended, following his instructions exactly. No commentary, no accusations, just information. Then I waited. Waiting was its own kind of exhaustion. Days passed without answers. Then the obstacles began to surface. The bank called first. A man with a clipped voice explained that some of my documentation was incomplete. They needed additional verification before they could proceed. I asked what kind. He listed items I had never known I would need. I wrote them down, thanked him, and hung up. When I set the phone aside, my hands were shaking again. Human Resources followed soon after. Hannah Pierce scheduled a meeting, her tone professional, almost apologetic. In the video call, she looked tired. She said the company needed a note confirming I was fit to work. Not because they doubted me, she said, but because concerns had been raised. She did not say by whom. She did not have to. I told her I understood. I told her I would provide what they needed. After the call ended, I stared at my reflection in the dark screen and felt a familiar wave of anger rise. It would have been easy to fire off an email explaining everything, to name names, to demand they choose a side. Instead, I closed the laptop and made an appointment with my doctor. Caleb warned me again when I told him. Every step has to be clean, he said. If there is anything that looks exaggerated or reactive, it gives them room to push back. I asked him what would happen if my father decided to escalate.
He did not hesitate. "He already is," he said. At the house, things were shifting. I did not see it myself, but I felt it through fragments that reached me anyway. Elaine stopped returning my messages entirely. Lucas unfriended me on social media without a word. A cousin sent a vague text asking if everything was okay, and then went silent when I replied. Richard, on the other hand, grew louder. His calls went unanswered. His text changed tone. First irritation, then accusation, then something closer to panic, though he never admitted it outright. "You are hurting this family," one message read. Another followed an hour later. "I built this house. I will not let you destroy it. I saved everyone." Rosa filled in the gaps when she could. She told me she had seen Elaine pacing the front yard late at night, phone pressed to her ear. She said Richard's truck sat untouched for days and then left early in the morning, returning late, like someone who did not want to be seen. The first official contact came on a Thursday afternoon. I was folding laundry when my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. I let it go to voicemail, heart pounding, then listened to the message with the sound turned low. "This is Special Agent Thomas Reed calling in regard to information that was recently submitted. I would like to ask a few follow-up questions. Please return my call at your convenience." His voice was calm, neutral, stripped of judgment. I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. This was it, the moment I had been bracing for. I waited until my breathing slowed, then called back. He asked questions the way someone does when they are trained not to reveal anything. Dates, clarifications, how I came across certain information. I answered carefully, sticking to facts. When I finished, there was a pause on the line. "Thank you," he said. "We'll be in touch." That was all. I hung up and felt a rush of conflicting sensations. Fear, relief, a strange sense of gravity, like something heavy had shifted off my chest but landed somewhere else instead. Nothing happened right away. Days passed, then a week. My doctor provided the note HR requested, stating I was cleared to work with accommodations. Hannah confirmed receipt and said the matter would be reviewed. The bank followed up asking for one more document. Each request felt like a test of endurance. At the same time, Richard unraveled. His messages grew erratic. He accused me of betrayal. He demanded to know who I had spoken to. One night, he left a voicemail that was mostly silence, punctuated by his breathing and the sound of something being knocked over in the background. I saved everyone. Rosa filled in the gaps when she could. She told me she had seen Elaine pacing the front yard late at night, phone pressed to her ear. She said Richard's truck sat untouched for days and then left early in the morning, returning late, like someone who did not want to be seen. The first official contact came on a Thursday afternoon. I was folding laundry when my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. I let it go to voicemail, heart pounding, then listened to the message with the sound turned low. "This is Special Agent Thomas Reed calling in regard to information that was recently submitted. I would like to ask a few follow-up questions. Please return my call at your convenience." His voice was calm, neutral, stripped of judgment. I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. This was it, the moment I had been bracing for. I waited until my breathing slowed, then called back. He asked questions the way someone does when they are trained not to reveal anything. Dates, clarifications, how I came across certain information. I answered carefully, sticking to facts. When I finished, there was a pause on the line. "Thank you," he said. "We'll be in touch." That was all. I hung up and felt a rush of conflicting sensations. Fear, relief, a strange sense of gravity, like something heavy had shifted off my chest but landed somewhere else instead. Nothing happened right away. Days passed, then a week. My doctor provided the note HR requested, stating I was cleared to work with accommodations. Hannah confirmed receipt and said the matter would be reviewed. The bank followed up, asking for one more document. Each request felt like a test of endurance. At the same time, Richard unraveled. His messages grew erratic. He accused me of betrayal. He demanded to know who I had spoken to. One night, he left a voicemail that was mostly silence, punctuated by his breathing and the sound of something being knocked over in the background. I saved every one. Rosa filled in the gaps when she could. She told me she had seen Elaine pacing the front yard late at night, phone pressed to her ear. She said Richard's truck sat untouched for days and then left early in the morning, returning late, like someone who did not want to be seen. The first official contact came on a Thursday afternoon. I was folding laundry when my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. I let it go to voicemail, heart pounding, then listened to the message with the sound turned low. This is Special Agent Thomas Reed calling in regard to information that was recently submitted. I would like to ask a few follow-up questions. Please return my call at your convenience. His voice was calm, neutral, stripped of judgment. I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. This was it, the moment I had been bracing for. I waited until my breathing slowed, then called back. He asked questions the way someone does when they are trained not to reveal anything. Dates, clarifications, how I came across certain information. I answered carefully, sticking to facts. When I finished, there was a pause on the line. "Thank you," he said. "We'll be in touch." That was all. I hung up and felt a rush of conflicting sensations. Fear, relief, a strange sense of gravity, like something heavy had shifted off my chest, but landed somewhere else instead. Nothing happened right away. Days passed, then a week. My doctor provided the note HR requested, stating I was cleared to work with accommodations. Hannah confirmed receipt and said the matter would be reviewed. The bank followed up, asking for one more document. Each request felt like a test of endurance. At the same time,
Chapter 5. Taking My Life Back. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. Not calm, exactly, but steadier, like the ground had stopped shifting beneath my feet, even if the dust had not settled yet. I went to work, answered emails, attended meetings, and waited. The waiting no longer felt like paralysis, it felt like process. The first confirmation came through my lawyer. Caleb called in the late afternoon, his voice measured, professional. "They have opened a formal investigation into your father's disability claims," he said. "Based on the timeline and the documentation, the estimated amount under review is around $186,000. I thanked him and ended the call. I did not cheer, I did not cry. I sat on the edge of my couch and let the number exist without trying to attach emotion to it. It was not my victory. It was the system doing what it was meant to do. The identity theft case moved separately. That part surprised me. The bank confirmed what the credit report already showed. The accounts had been opened without my authorization. Charges had been made over years, not months. Responsibility was traced, not assumed. Elaine's name surfaced in ways that could not be explained away as misunderstanding. Her case was handled on its own track, quiet and procedural. Lucas did not escape notice either. A receipt from a pawn shop tied him to items that had gone missing from the house long before I ever questioned it. Family heirlooms, small things, with no real market value, sold to cover personal debt. When I heard that part, I felt a familiar ache, not of anger, but of recognition. Everyone had been taking what they could and calling it survival. At work, the tone shifted slowly. HR followed up with a final message confirming that my medical documentation was sufficient and that my record was clear. The concerns raised had been reviewed and closed. No disciplinary action, no mark against my name. Hannah's email ended with a simple line: "Please let us know if you need any additional support." I read it twice and felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief exactly, but validation. I had not imagined it. I had not overreacted.
I had handled it correctly. I moved into my own place a month later, a small apartment with thin walls and a kitchen window that faced the parking lot. It was nothing special, but the lease had my name on it. The utilities were in my name. The mailbox key was mine. The first night I slept there, I lay awake listening to unfamiliar sounds and felt safe anyway. My credit score did not bounce back overnight. It crept upward in small increments, month by month. Each notification felt like a quiet apology from a system that had finally caught up to the truth. The symbolic moment came when I walked into a pawn shop on the edge of town. I had the receipt number written on a scrap of paper, my handwriting careful and deliberate. The clerk disappeared into the back and returned with a small box. Inside was my mother's necklace. It was not worth much, a simple chain worn smooth in places where her fingers used to rest. Lucas had sold it without a second thought. Buying it back was straightforward. No negotiation, no drama. I paid and thanked the clerk and walked out holding the box against my chest. I sat in my car for a moment before driving away, turning the necklace over my hands. This was not revenge. It was reclamation. I did not confront my father. I did not meet Elaine for closure. I did not ask Lucas why. The answers would not have changed anything that mattered. Instead, I chose distance. No contact was not an act of punishment. It was a boundary, a line I drew and did not step over again. I blocked numbers. I removed myself from group threads. I stopped explaining my decisions to people who had already decided who I was. In the quiet that followed, I noticed something unexpected. I was no longer tense all the time. My shoulders dropped. My breathing deepened. I laughed more easily. Healing did not arrive in a dramatic wave. It showed up in small, ordinary moments. One evening, as I hung the necklace around my neck, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked older than I had a year ago, but steadier too, like someone who had learned how to stand without leaning. What I took from all of it was not satisfaction at someone else's downfall, it was clarity. I learned that justice does not always announce itself. Sometimes it moves quietly, one form at a time, one decision after another. I learned that family does not give anyone permission to erase you. And I learned that staying calm does not mean staying silent. If you are watching this and something in my story feels familiar, I want you to hear this part clearly. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to document, to ask questions, to involve systems that exist for a reason. Boundaries are not cruelty, they are care. Thank you for being here and listening. If this story helped you see your own situation more clearly, or if you have been through something similar, I invite you to share your thoughts below. Stories like this matter because they remind us we are not alone and that speaking up can change more than we think. For the first time in a long while, I closed my door at night knowing exactly who had the key.